Hello. Welcome to another Joyful Gem with Audrey Joy. When my husband and I were first married, we lived on the south end of Colorado Springs, near Fountain Creek. Now, Fountain Creek runs the length of the city, north to south, and there's a trail that runs along Fountain Creek. Now, it's fully developed and a lovely trail now, but 25 years ago, it wasn't so developed. The church that we attended was also near Fountain Creek, and I got the bright idea that I could ride my bicycle from our house to the church. It was 14 miles on the interstate. I figured it would just take me a couple of hours. Now, my husband told me that this was a bad idea. He said it would take longer than I thought, and it would be harder than I thought it would be. I was in my mid-30s, I was in excellent physical condition, and quite frankly, I didn't believe him. So one summer day, a few months after we were married and he was away visiting family in Florida, I set out to prove him wrong. This was the summer of 2000. I had the good sense to take my cell phone and a water bottle, but I did not have the good sense to tell anybody what I was doing. It took me over 4 hours to make it to the church. I had to carry my bike through several areas. I had to scale undeveloped terrain through several areas. And I was an employee at the church at the time, so I did have keys to be able to get into the office. Once I did that, I just lay down on the floor and just rested for several minutes. Then I totally stole food from my coworkers as I was starving. Whatever was in the refrigerator wasn't nailed down. I ate. I refilled my water bottle, and then I took some time to figure out what my next steps were. A smart person would have cried uncle at this point. I mean, I still had to get back home, and I was still 14 miles away with a bicycle in tow. I thought about calling a cab, but I didn't have any or much cash on me, and I didn't think I had enough cash at home to cover the price of the cab. It was before Ubers, of course. And I already had to explain to my coworkers why I had stolen and eaten their food on a Saturday. Plus, I didn't want to bother the pastors because it was a Saturday and they were getting ready for church the next day. I thought of all kinds of friends that I could call, but I couldn't find their phone numbers. I didn't have it in the cell phone. Anyway, I finally decided the only option was for me to retrace my steps. And honestly, I was a little too prideful to admit failure. I was sure I could make it back home. So after a good 30-minute break or so, I determined that was what I was going to do. I made it about an hour back south and realized that I was entirely too physically exhausted, and there was no way I was going to make it home. There was a 7-Eleven just above the trail, right where I made this courageous decision. So I hauled my bike up and myself into the parking lot at the 7-Eleven. And I thought about it for a minute, racking my brain for a solution, and then it hit me. I had a really good friend that lived just a few blocks from where I was. So I found her number somehow. I don't recall if it was in my cell phone, if I looked it up in a phone book, but I called, and thankfully she answered. I opened the conversation by saying this: Beth, have you ever started out to do something that you thought was a really good idea and found out as you got into it, it was not? Of course she had. We all have. Within 5 minutes, she pulled into the parking lot of 7-Eleven, she helped me load my bike, and drove me home. I did admit to my husband when I talked to him that evening what I had done. He was none too happy with me, but he took a great deal of pleasure in hearing me say, "I was wrong, you were right." Recalling this story, I thought of Eve in Genesis. God told Adam and her, "Don't eat from this one tree." God said don't do it, and the one thing that he said don't do, they did, of course. And mankind has been suffering the consequences of that ever since. For me, my level is pretty high of rebellion in my heart. And if I don't keep that under God's control, I still get in pickles and end up biting off more than I can chew and getting into messes like riding my bike to the church 14 miles away. So I admonish you, learn from me. learn from Eve, stay obedient to God and to those He puts in leadership over you. It's always the best way. If you found value in this gem, share it with a friend and follow me on my Facebook page, This Is For Me. If you're not already a Joyful Gem subscriber, well, you can change that by logging in to my website, thisisforme.com, or hey, just email me at audreyjoy, thisisforme.com. Be joyful.